Elena sat across from me, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, the faint shadows under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. Her gaze drifted toward the window, as if searching for an escape, or perhaps for the right words to begin. I waited in the silence, allowing her the space to gather her thoughts. Finally, she exhaled deeply, her voice low but steady. "I don't even know where to start. Everything feels tangled." I nodded, offering her a reassuring glance. "It's my marriage," she continued. "Or at least, what's left of it. Alex and I, there's no us anymore. We're roommates, partners in logistics. Everything revolves around the kids. Every conversation, every argument, and trust me, there are plenty of those. The minute they're asleep, it's like the air between us just empties. We don't talk. We don't look at each other. Sometimes, I wonder if we even like each other anymore." Her voice cracked slightly, but she caught herself, sitting up straighter, as though steeling herself against her own vulnerability. "When did this start to feel normal?" she asked, almost to herself. I leaned forward slightly, giving her a moment to sit with her emotions before gently prompting her. "What does normal feel like to you now?" "Normal?" She gave a hollow laugh. "Normal is the chaos of the mornings, getting the kids dressed, lunches packed, Alex rushing out the door to work before I've even finished my coffee. Normal is spending my entire day either working or running after the kids, and then coming home to argue about their screen time or how long they should stay at the dinner table." Her fingers tightened around each other as she spoke, her words tumbling out faster. "I want structure. I need it. The kids need it. But Alex thinks I'm too strict. He says I should let them be kids. And I guess that's what he's doing, being the fun parent. While I'm the one enforcing rules, getting them to bed on time, making sure they brush their teeth and do their homework. It's exhausting. I feel like the bad guy all the time. And then, when the kids are finally asleep, there's nothing. He's on his phone. I'm scrolling through mine. It's like we're strangers sitting in the same room." I noticed her voice faltering, so I shifted the focus slightly. "What do you miss the most about how things used to be?" Elena looked down at her hands, her lips pressed tightly together, as if afraid to speak the truth. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I miss laughing with him. I miss feeling like he saw me, like I was more than just their mom. I miss the nights we'd stay up talking about everything and nothing. Now, the only time we talk is to argue about the kids. And when we argue, it's like we're keeping score, pulling out every little mistake we've made over the years. I don't even recognize us anymore." The weight of her words filled the room, and for a moment, we sat in silence. Then, she let out another breath, almost as if letting go of something heavy. "I don't want to resent him," she said quietly. "But sometimes, I do. I resent how easy it seems for him to be carefree, while I'm drowning in the details. I hate that I feel this way, but I don't know how to stop." Her confession lingered between us, raw and unfiltered. I could sense how much she longed for connection but felt trapped in the routines and roles that had come to define her life. It's not uncommon, I thought. Parenting can be an incredible journey, but it has a way of amplifying the cracks in a relationship. And when those cracks are left unattended, they can feel like deep, uncrossable chasms. "Have you and Alex ever talked about what you both want from your relationship now?" I asked. Elena shook her head. "When would we even have the time? Between the kids, work, and everything else, it's like, there's no room left for us." I don't even know if he'd want to have that conversation. And honestly, I'm scared of what he might say. What if he doesn't think we're worth fixing? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she blinked them away, determined not to let them fall. "It's just hard. Everything feels so hard. And the worst part is, I know the kids can sense it. They hear the arguments. They see the tension. I never wanted that for them. I grew up in a house like that, and I promised myself I'd do better. But here I am, repeating the same mistakes. She stopped abruptly, as though the realization had hit her in real time. For the first time in our session, she seemed to let her guard down entirely, her vulnerability laid bare. As I observed her, I could see that beneath the frustration and hurt was a deep love for her family and a yearning to find her way back to the partnership she and Alex once had. If you've ever felt the weight of parenting or struggled to keep your relationship alive amidst the chaos, you're not alone. What do you think? Could a moment of reconnection or teamwork make a difference in a situation like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. I'm always curious to know how these stories resonate with you. Elena shifted in her seat, her eyes staring past me, as though looking for something she couldn't quite find. We weren't always like this. There was a time when everything just worked. Alex and I used to be so in sync, you know. We didn't have to try so hard. It was easy. She paused, a faint smile touching her lips before fading. When we met, we were like a team. We'd finish each other's sentences, plan spontaneous road trips, stay up all night just talking. He made me feel seen, like I was the most important person in the world to him. And I think I was. Back then, he used to call me his partner in crime. Her voice softened, and her gaze drifted lower. When I got pregnant with our first, we were over the moon. We'd been trying for a while, so when it finally happened, we were both so excited. We planned everything together, the nursery, the name, even the music I'd listened to during labor. It was this big adventure we were on together, and it brought us even closer. I used to joke that Alex read more parenting books than I did. She let out a small laugh, though it sounded hollow. And then she was born. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's amazing, my little firecracker. But the moment she arrived, something shifted. I think it was the exhaustion, the sleepless nights, the crying. We were so tired all the time that it felt like we didn't have anything left for each other. We started bickering about the little things, who was more tired, who forgot to wash the bottles, who was supposed to wake up for the 3 a.m. feeding. It was stupid stuff, but it added up. Her fingers traced the edge of the armrest, her expression tight. By the time our second came along, it was like the cracks had already started to form. I thought we'd be better prepared, but instead, it just magnified everything. I wanted structure. I needed it, honestly. With 2 kids under 5, the chaos was too much for me. But Alex, he didn't see it that way. He thought I was being too uptight. He'd roll his eyes whenever I tried to set rules or a schedule. Let them be kids, he'd say. And I'd snap back, they need boundaries. Before I knew it, every conversation turned into a fight about who was right. And neither of us was really listening to the other. She sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair. It's not like I wanted to fight with him. I wanted him to back me up. I wanted us to be a united front for the kids. But instead, I felt like he was undermining me, and I guess he probably felt like I was undermining him. I started to resent him for making me feel like the bad guy all the time, and I'm sure he resented me for making him feel like he wasn't doing enough. It became this vicious cycle that we couldn't break. I leaned forward slightly, letting her know I was fully engaged. How did you two handle things before the kids came along? She looked up, her expression wistful. We were so good at compromising. We could disagree without it turning into a fight. Alex was the easygoing one, and I was the planner, but it balanced out. He'd push me to relax, and I'd help him stay focused. We were good for each other, you know. But now, it feels like those same differences that used to work for us are tearing us apart. Her voice faltered, and she took a moment to steady herself. I don't think I ever realized how much I relied on him to lighten things up until he stopped trying. Or maybe I stopped letting him. I don't know. All I know is, when the kids came along, it felt like there wasn't room for us anymore. And now, I don't even recognize who we've become. There was a long silence as her words settled between us. Parenting changes things, I said after a moment. It can challenge even the strongest relationships. But the bond you and Alex had before, it's still there. It's just buried under the weight of everything else right now. She looked at me, her eyes filled with both hope and doubt. Do you really think so? I do. The love that brought you together hasn't disappeared. It's just been overshadowed by the stress and exhaustion. But with time and effort, you can rediscover it. She nodded slowly, as if trying to convince herself to believe it. It's hard to see a way out when you're stuck in the middle of it, she admitted. It is, I said, but the fact that you're here, talking about it, shows you're ready to try. And that's the first step. If you've ever felt like life's demands have distanced you from someone you care about, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What helped you reconnect? Share your experiences in the comments, I'd love to continue the conversation. Elena sat back in her chair, her arms crossed tightly as though she was bracing herself for what she was about to say. It happened last week. I was running late from a work meeting, and I called Alex to remind him that the kids needed to be in bed by 8. He said, yeah, I got it. But when I walked in at 9:30, the house was chaos. The kids were still awake, eating candy, and watching TV. There were wrappers everywhere. It was like a bomb went off in the living room. Her voice grew sharper as she spoke, the frustration from the memory still fresh. I lost it. I started yelling, asking him why he couldn't follow one simple rule. He just looked at me like I was crazy and said, they're just kids. It's not the end of the world. And that just made me angrier. I told him he was being irresponsible, that he was undermining everything I was trying to do. And then he started yelling back. He said I was too controlling, that I suck all the fun out of everything, and that I treat him like one of the kids instead of my husband. We were just screaming at each other by the end of it, and the kids were sitting there, wide-eyed and scared. It wasn't until my daughter started crying that we even realized they were still in the room. Her voice cracked, and she quickly covered her face with her hands. I feel like a terrible mother. I mean, what kind of example are we setting for them? I always swore I'd never let them grow up in a house full of fighting, and here I am, doing exactly that. The room was quiet for a moment, save for the sound of her uneven breathing. Do you know what scares me the most? She looked up, her eyes red but defiant. It's not the fighting. It's what happens after. Once the kids were in bed, we didn't talk. We didn't even look at each other. He just went to the couch and started scrolling on his phone like nothing happened. And I sat in the bedroom, stewing in my anger. We didn't speak for 2 days. 2 days. I can't tell if we're angry at each other or if we've just stopped caring enough to even try. And that terrifies me. I don't want to feel this way about him. I don't want my kids to grow up thinking this is what marriage is supposed to be. I let her words sink in, her pain cutting through the air like a blade. Elena, it's clear how much you care about your family. And you're right, this isn't the example you want to set for your kids. But it's also important to remember that no relationship is perfect. Conflicts like these are opportunities to understand each other better and grow stronger together. She frowned, as though struggling to believe me. But how do we even begin to fix this? Every time we try to talk about anything, it just ends in a fight. It's like we're stuck in this endless loop, and I don't know how to break it. Have you ever thought about what each of you is really trying to say during those fights? What you're both hoping the other will hear? She tilted her head, considering the question. I don't know. I mean, I guess I want him to understand how hard I'm trying. I'm not doing all of this, setting routines, enforcing rules, because I want to control everything. I just want the kids to feel safe and secure. I want him to help me with that, not fight me on it. I nodded, encouraging her to keep going. And maybe he just wants me to loosen up, to trust him more. He's always been the fun parent, and I know the kids love that about him. But it's hard to let go when I feel like I'm the only one holding everything together." The realization seemed to soften her expression, as though she was beginning to see things in a new light. "It sounds like you both have the same goal, to be good parents and to give your kids the best life possible. You're just approaching it from different angles. Understanding that could be the key to bridging the gap between you." She sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of the armrest again. "So, what do we do? How do we stop this from happening again?" "One step at a time," I said. "The first step is learning to listen to each other, not just to the words, but to the feelings behind them. You're both trying to be heard, but when emotions run high, it's easy to miss the message. Slowing down, even during an argument, can make all the difference." Elena nodded slowly, as though she was beginning to see a glimmer of hope. "It's going to take work, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "But anything worth saving always does." Have you ever felt like an argument with someone you love wasn't about the surface issue but something deeper? How did you work through it? I'd love to hear your stories, feel free to share them below. Elena leaned forward, her hands clasped together tightly as though she was trying to hold herself together. "I've been thinking about what you said last time, about how we're both trying to be good parents, just in different ways. And I can see it now. I can see how he's trying to give them the childhood he didn't have, just like I'm trying to give them the stability I never had. But knowing that doesn't make it any easier when we're in the moment, when we're both just so, stuck in our own ways." She paused, her brow furrowing in thought. "Like the other day. I came home, and Alex was building this massive pillow fort in the living room with the kids. They were laughing, having so much fun, and for a second, I just stood there watching them. It was beautiful. But then I noticed the mess. There were cushions everywhere, toys scattered all over, and a spilled drink soaking into the carpet. And instead of joining in or even just letting them have their fun, I started picking up the mess. I told Alex he should have cleaned up the drink, and he snapped at me, saying I was ruining the moment. We didn't fight, thank God, but the tension was there. He stopped playing, and the kids could feel it too. They didn't laugh as much after that. I hate that I did that. I hate that I keep doing that." Her voice trembled, and she looked down, as if ashamed of her own words. "It's like I can't stop myself. I want everything to be perfect for them, but in trying to control it all, I'm sucking the joy out of it. And Alex, he's just trying to keep things light and fun, but when he ignores the structure I'm trying to build, it feels like he's saying my efforts don't matter. Like I don't matter." Her eyes met mine, pleading for an answer I couldn't give her yet. "Do you think that's how he feels too? Like I don't see what he's doing, what he's trying to give them?" "It's possible," I said. "When two people are caught up in their own perspectives, it's easy to miss what the other is trying to say. But recognizing that is a huge step. It means you're starting to see things from his point of view, even if it's hard." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I guess I never really thought about it like that. I've been so focused on what I need, on what I think the kids need, that I've forgotten to consider what Alex needs. He probably feels just as invisible as I do." There was a long pause as she let the words settle. "I love him. I really do. And I know he loves me too. But it feels like we've forgotten how to show it. How do we get back to that? How do we stop feeling like enemies and start feeling like partners again?" I leaned back slightly, giving her space to process. "Start small," I said. "Think about what brought you together in the first place, the things you loved about each other before the stress of parenting took over. What are some ways you can reconnect, even if it's just for a few minutes each day?" She tilted her head, considering the question. "We used to talk a lot. About everything. We'd stay up late just sharing our thoughts, our dreams, even the silly little things that didn't matter. But now, by the time the kids are in bed, we're so drained that all we can manage is scrolling through our phones in separate rooms. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and a spark of determination flickered in her eyes. Maybe we need to start talking again. Not about the kids, not about schedules or chores, just us. Even if it's only for 10 minutes a day, it's a start, right? It's a great start, I said. And as you do, try to approach those conversations with curiosity and kindness. Instead of focusing on what's gone wrong, look for what's still right between you. That connection is still there, it's just waiting to be nurtured again. She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her that day. I like that. I think Alex would like that too. And maybe, if we can start rebuilding that connection, the parenting stuff will get easier. Or at least, we'll be able to tackle it together. I nodded, sensing the shift in her energy. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. The fact that you're willing to make the effort says a lot about how much you care, for Alex, for your kids, and for yourself. Her smile grew a little wider, a little more confident. I want to try. I really do. I just hope it's not too late. It's never too late, I said. Not if you're both willing to work for it. Parenting can test even the strongest relationships, but moments like these remind us that love and connection are worth fighting for. What's one way you've found to reconnect with someone you care about? Share your thoughts or advice below, I'd love to hear from you. Elena sat in the chair with a quiet sense of resolve I hadn't seen before. She had her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady but softened. I talked to Alex. Really talked to him for the first time in I don't even know how long. I waited until the kids were asleep, and instead of going into our separate corners like we usually do, I sat down next to him on the couch. At first, he looked surprised, maybe even suspicious. I didn't start with the usual stuff, like blaming him for something or bringing up the kids. I told him I missed him. I told him I missed us. She paused, her lips pressing together briefly as her voice grew softer. I could see something shift in him when I said that. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it didn't feel like we were on opposite sides. It felt like we were partners again. I told him how I'd been feeling, how I felt like we were stuck in this endless cycle of arguing and resentment, and how scared I was that we were losing each other. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just talked about how I felt and what I wanted for us. She drew in a breath, her shoulders lifting slightly before settling back down. And then he opened up too. He told me he'd been feeling the same way, like I didn't see how hard he was trying, like he was always the one who was wrong in my eyes. He admitted that he'd been avoiding me, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to fix it either. We stayed up for hours, just talking. About how we got here, about what we both wanted, about how much we missed each other. It was hard to hear some of the things he said, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. Her voice grew steadier, a hint of hope shining through her words. We agreed to make some changes. Nothing drastic, just little things to start. We're going to set aside one night a week for just the two of us, no kids, no phones, no distractions. And when we do argue, we're going to try to stop and really listen to each other instead of just trying to win. Her smile softened, but it was genuine. It's not going to be easy. I know that. We've got a lot of work to do, and we're going to mess up along the way. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're in this together again. And that makes all the difference. I nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride for the progress she had made. Elena, what you just described, that's the foundation of rebuilding a strong partnership. It's not about avoiding conflict or being perfect. It's about showing up for each other, even when it's hard. And it sounds like both you and Alex are ready to do that. She nodded, her expression a mixture of determination and gratitude. I just want my kids to see what a healthy, loving relationship looks like. I want them to grow up knowing that even when things get tough, you don't give up on the people you love. And you're showing them that right now, I said. By putting in the effort to strengthen your relationship, you're giving them a powerful example of resilience and love. She leaned back slightly, a sense of calm settling over her. It feels good to hope again. To believe that we can come back from this. That's where it all starts, I said. Rebuilding any relationship takes time, patience, and commitment, but as Elena's story shows, even small steps can lead to big changes. What's one thing you do to strengthen your connection with the people you care about? I'd love to hear your thoughts or advice. Drop a comment below.